founder and director of the Center for Hearing Loss Help, which is now located in Linden, where he lives. He is a hearing loss coping skills specialist, researcher, author, and speaker. So we're extremely lucky to have him part of our community here. His expertise includes such topics as hearing loss, coping strategies, ototoxic drugs, which we've had a talk on, tinnitus, hyperacusis, Meniere's disease, and musical ear syndrome. He's no stranger to hearing loss himself. He has lived with a lifelong, severe, hereditary hearing loss and also has tinnitus. For more than 25 years, he has provided education, support, and counsel to hard of hearing people through his books, articles, presentation, and personal contacts. People from all over the world contact Neil through his email and through his website. He's the author of 11 books. Several of them have several editions, including the comprehensive 355-page book titled Take Control of Your Tinnitus and Here's How. And he has more than 1,000 articles related to ears and hearing. So I'd like you to welcome Neil as he speaks to us on taking control of our tinnitus. Thank you, Neil.
Get my mic on. Now let's get this screen up. There we are. Okay, everybody can hear me fine?
Yes.
Whoops, where's my? Oh.
Maybe be a little closer to your microphone.
My microphone is on my camera. It's wide open. It should be automatic.
Okay.
As long as you're hearing me fine, I can always talk louder. I forgot, I've got the phones have microphone on them, but I can't use that one because it got the wrong plug, so I can't plug it into my computer. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here with you, albeit by a Zoom, as we've been doing. And I'll share some things that I've learned about tinnitus and how to successfully deal with it. You see, tinnitus is a stranger that one day suddenly invades your life, unwanted and unbidden to be sure, but there nevertheless. And how you cope with this stranger is up to you. But how you cope, whether good coping strategies or otherwise, makes all the difference in how you live with your tinnitus. Now, there's a number of things that you can do that will either eliminate your tinnitus or bring it under your control so that it no longer interferes with your life. Now, incidentally, tinnitus has two pronunciations. It's tinnitus, like I say, and in Canada and the UK, we both mostly say tinnitus. And here in America, we mostly say tinnitus. Well, I learned tinnitus, so that's my story and I'm sticking with it, but either one is right. If you get a fourth syllable in there, you know you're doing something wrong. I hear that a lot. These people get in a tinnitus or something like that, but it's just tinnitus or tinnitus. Now, we often describe tinnitus as a ringing in the ears, which is taken from the Latin for tinnitus, tinere, meaning to ring like a bell. So we call it ringing in the ears, but that's not the only tinnitus sound. For example, besides ringing in your ears, are you working or not? There. It could be a roaring, beating, clicking, banging, buzzing, hissing, humming, fluttering, clanging, drumming, sizzling, whooshing, rumbling, pulsating, whistling, or dreadful shrieking noise. To some people, tinnitus sounds like owls hooting, crickets chirping, radio static, rushing water, breaking glass, bells ringing, or chainsaws running. So that gives you an idea. That's not a comprehensive list, but that's enough to know that tinnitus can be a wide variety of sounds. And you can hear more than one of those sounds at a time. I have 3 main tinnitus sounds that I hear. I always hear a high-pitched hissy whine sound. Sometimes in my right ear, I hear what sounds like a flock of birds twittering. And I also hear a low-pitched rumbling sound that I also feel. So that's how, just what you have. And if you hear 6 or more, boy, you're in trouble. Now, too often we think of tinnitus as a condition over which we have absolutely no control. And therefore, we put our trust in doctors to do something to us to fix it. And yet our doctors typically tell us, there's nothing I can do for you. You just have to go home and learn to live with it. And typically, they don't offer us any hope, and they don't give us any advice on how we may accomplish this. And thus, typically, many people are devastated, they become depressed, and ultimately they give up hope of ever living a normal life again. Now, that's the bad news. That's the typical medical model of tinnitus and has been up to now. There's some good news on the horizon that they're trying to get through to doctors with a special tinnitus program that they can do a better job than what they're doing now. However, it's bad news what's going on now, but it doesn't have to be this way. And I'm here today to tell you the good news, that you can do things to gain a good measure of control over your tinnitus. And not only that, it is imperative that you do that, because if you don't, then by default, you have just given control over to your tinnitus, and your tinnitus will run and often ruin your life. Now, in the past, doctors used to think that tinnitus was caused by something gone wrong in your inner ears. And many people still hold this belief today. The idea is your hair cells, or the little cilia on your hairs, are not working right, and they're causing problems, and you hear that as tinnitus. Well, that's not exactly true. You see, people that had intractable tinnitus, they just couldn't stand it, they went to their surgeon, and they started cutting the auditory nerves of these people, they believed that not hearing, being totally deaf, was better than having this horrible tinnitus. So the doctors started cutting the auditory nerves. And they got a real surprise, because guess what? More than 50% of the cases that they did this, tinnitus stayed just the same or was even louder. And that's when it became obvious that there had to be another explanation for the cause of tinnitus. And we now know that tinnitus initially may have or may not have something to do with our inner ears, but it always, always, always has something to do with our brains. Now, there's many causes of tinnitus, but I'm only briefly going to just mention 4 of them. Loud noise is the most common cause of tinnitus, and it is one that is totally preventable if we would exercise a little bit of constraint on putting up with loud noise. Number 2 is hearing loss. Tinnitus and hearing loss go together. Some people are worried that tinnitus causes hearing loss, but it's exactly the opposite way. Hearing loss results in tinnitus. And most people, actually about 90% of the people that have tinnitus have hearing loss, whether they know it or not, because you could have hidden hearing loss. Typically, it would be up in the high frequencies where audiologists don't test. Number 3 is ototoxic drugs. An enormous number of drugs can cause tinnitus and other ear-damaging side effects. We call them ototoxic drugs. I pronounce it wrongly. It should be ototoxic, but either way works. And my book called Autotoxic Drugs Exposed. Describes the various autotoxic side effects, including tinnitus, of over 1,000 drugs in this edition. This is the third edition. My fourth edition, which I'll start working on later this year, will be, well, twice as big, so it's going to be a lot more. Just hang on. If you'd like a listing of all the drugs that cause tinnitus, this is one that I made back in 2016 for the ATA, American Tinnitus Association. You can download a free copy if you want. It's got 595 drugs in it. It's, you know, it's 32 pages, and you can see it's just single spaced. You can see there's, you know, it doesn't tell you anything about it, just lists what drugs can cause tinnitus. So that is available on the website there. And number 4, which is the one we're going to zero in on today, is, as a main cause of tinnitus, is negative emotions. So I don't think that very many people realize the tremendous role that negative emotions such as stress and anxiety and worry and depression have on tinnitus. Did you know maybe that tinnitus studies reveal that depression precedes a significantly large number of tinnitus cases? And thus, if you're depressed, you are more likely to experience tinnitus than otherwise. And also, a large number of people that suffer from tinnitus were predisposed to the tinnitus by the depression, and before that, from not correctly dealing with severe stress and anxiety. So if you're depressed, one of the effective treatments, one of the first things you should be looking at is bringing your depression under control. Because as you do that, you'll tend to find that your depression begins to lift and your tinnitus becomes less and less intrusive and starts to fade into the background. Now, being anxious can cause tinnitus just by itself with no other compounding factors. And here's why. See, when you're anxious, you put your body into fight or flight mode. And when this happens, your senses actually become sharper than they were before. And so it means that you can actually hear your tinnitus better, or maybe you'll start to hear tinnitus for the first time. And when you start to hear tinnitus for the first time, or it gets louder, it makes you even more anxious. And now you're worried that you've done something bad to your body. And then your emotional system kicks in and makes your tinnitus sounds even louder and more intrusive. And also, unfortunately, for those people that tend to be high-strung and anxious, when you're anxious and you also have tinnitus, it's harder to bring it under your control than if you are calm and laid back. I like that picture of me, sorta, I never did have black hair, relaxing with my big size 14 shoes up on my desk. I do that a lot. And I thought that the subliminal message coming across would be that you need to remain calm and relaxed when dealing with your tinnitus. Very important. So if you're anxious all the time, the solution is also obvious. Learn to control your anxiety. And my recommendation is that you find a good therapist, a good counselor who can help you uncover the reasons for your anxiety and also how to calm yourself down without resorting to drugs. And that's an important thing, because all the anti-anxiety drugs, all the antidepressant drugs, all cause or worsen tinnitus. So you really don't want to take drugs. Sometimes you have to take them in the short term, but it's not a long-term solution. Now, not only do negative emotions predispose you to tinnitus in the first place, they're also significant in determining if you will suffer from tinnitus or if you will just experience tinnitus. See, there's about 45 million Americans that have tinnitus. In other words, they experience tinnitus, and of those, around 12 million suffer from it. And this is largely the reason why. So in order to get your tinnitus under control, you need to first learn how to control your emotion or your emotional response to your tinnitus. So let's look at how your emotions influence your tinnitus. Tinnitus research has more and more revealed that tinnitus suffering is an emotional brain phenomenon. We're not talking about ears, we're talking about brain. It's becoming clear that a person's state of mind is inextricably linked to the distress they experience for their tinnitus. In turn, the distress they experience reflects back to whether the person perceives tinnitus as a threat to their well-being or not. And this is a key thing. If you get nothing else out of this presentation, don't treat tinnitus as a threat to your well-being. That's the key. Although tinnitus is not commonly considered a psychosomatic condition, in actual fact, tinnitus almost always is psychosomatic in nature. Now, don't get all mixed up. Psychosomatic is just a fancy word made up of two Greek words, psychic, or your mind, and soma, or your body. And so psychosomatic just means that there's a significant emotional component to a physical condition. So think of your tinnitus as the physical condition and also your psychological makeup. And so as a result, trying to treat the somatic part of tinnitus, which is what audiologists and most tinnitus practitioners do, without also helping the person improve their state of mind, is probably not going to work well or at all. Now, conversely, if you treat the person's emotional state of mind, you can typically help the person more than trying to treat the somatic part. And of course, the best is to treat both parts together so that you'll have a tinnitus program that gives you sound therapy, which is treating the physical part, and you will have emotional, psychological help in dealing with your tinnitus, and that works the best by far. Now, I want you to be aware that there's a tremendous difference between people with tinnitus. I mean, some people hear a sound so faint, they tell me they can only hear it when they're in a quiet room. And you know what they say? They tell me, you know, they're all bent out of shape. They just go to pieces. I mean, they're a basket case. And it's so faint, and I'm thinking to myself, and they call that a problem? They should try and have mine. There's other people that have screaming tinnitus. I mean, we're talking loud. And you know what they tell me? It's no big deal. You see, it's not the volume at which you perceive your tinnitus that makes the difference. It's your emotional response to your perception of your tinnitus. You perceive your tinnitus at any volume, but actually, studies have shown that your tinnitus is always actually quite soft. And so you want your perception to also be soft. So that's why some people suffer from tinnitus and other people don't. And in order to understand why this is so, we need to delve into the subconscious mind. Now, the part of your subconscious mind that deals with your emotions is called your limbic system. Now, your limbic system has a number of different jobs, but I'm only going to be talking today about your limbic system and your emotions. that arise from real or perceived threats to your physical or emotional well-being. And that's another thing to note. The threat can be perceived and not be real, but you suffer from tinnitus just the same as if it had been a real threat. Now, one of the vital duties of your limbic system is to listen to every sound you hear and flag sounds that have any emotional response. So if you attach an emotional response to a certain sound, you're going to have your limbic system flagging that sound. And if, say, I don't flag that sound, I won't have any tinnitus involvement at all. So in other words, think of it this way. Think of your limbic system as a computer. It has a database in its head. And every sound you've ever heard since the day you were born, and probably even before, and your emotional response to that sound is listed. So conceptually, think of this database as a table with two columns. And the first column contains the sound or words, including the tone of your voice and its context. And the second column contains a colored flag that denotes your emotional response to that sound. Now, again, conceptually think of these flags as colored green for no emotional response. In other words, it doesn't bother you at all. Yellow for a mild response, orange for a moderate response, red for a strong response, double red, a high response, and a triple red flag for an extreme, life-threatening response. That's your limbic system's job. That's what it does. Now let's look at two scenarios that illustrate the two extremes of emotional response. So the first scenario is furtive footfalls in the night. In this first scenario, let's imagine that you are a young lady. You live in the ground floor apartment, and in fact, your apartment is sunk half into the ground so that your windows are all at ground level. It's a hot summer night, and so you've got your bedroom window wide open. You're in bed, you're sound asleep. That's the setting. And then there's a faint, furtive footfall outside your open bedroom window. A boogeyman is lurking right outside your window. And the almost imperceptibly faint footfall sounds he makes wakens you out of a dead sleep. You bolt upright in bed and your heart's going pitter patter, as a shot of adrenaline surges through your body. You are now in fight or flight mode, ready for action, whether to fight off the boogeyman or to flee for your life. So here's the question: what woke you up? It certainly wasn't the volume of the sound, because the sound was so faint that you almost couldn't hear it. If it had been any fainter, you wouldn't have heard it at all. What really woke you up was your limbic system reacting to the triple red emotional response flag in its database to help protect your life. Now, maybe you didn't realize this, but we have two distant warning systems, our eyes and our ears. And when we sleep, of course, our eyes are off duty. Our ears are never, ever off duty. They always are listening for any sounds that might be indicate danger to us. So at the subconscious level, your limbic system is listening to all these sounds as they come in. And it checks in its database to see what the emotional flag should be. If it's a green flag, it doesn't even bother waking you up. Probably doesn't wake you up for a yellow one either. But you get a triple red one and you just bolt right out of bed. You can't ignore that. It shoots, what it does is it turns its internal volume wide open and shoots that message to the conscious level. And you just can't ignore that. And so it wakes you up. Okay, so now that is your limbic system doing its job. It's primed you for action. Now I'm going to take the opposite. Instead of a triple red flag one, let's look at one that is a green flag. In other words, a good example would be fridge noise. Now assume that you've had your fridge for some time, you're used to its noise. You don't even know that it's on. You're not aware that it's on. If you were in your kitchen right now, and assuming you got normal hearing and not hard of hearing like we are, but if I was in your kitchen with you and I said, is your fridge on? You would have to actually stop and listen to see if it's on. And the reason you would have to do that is because it's flagged as a green flag. And normally it's not in your consciousness. To you, it's just a useless background noise that you can safely ignore because there's no threat involved. And the result is that you so totally ignore these sounds, you're only at best half aware of them. So you have to stop and listen if you really want to know. And the reason you need to do this is cool. It's not because you can't hear the sound, but because your limbic system has turned the volume down, so it's not bothering you, because there's all these sounds that you hear all the time. And the vast majority of sounds that your ears actually hear never reach your conscious level. You're never aware of them because they're just extra junk noise. And you need to keep your brain available for processing stuff that's worth something to you. So in the first scenario, what you had is your limbic system taking a very faint sound and turning it into a very loud sound as you perceive it, so that you can save your life. In the second scenario, your limbic system took a louder sound, a real louder sound, and turned the volume down so that you're not even aware that it's there. That is just the way your limbic system works. Now let's take this analogy a little further. Conceptually, think of yourself as a 2-floor house. Now you, the conscious you, lives in the main floor, and your limbic system, because it's subconscious, obviously lives in the basement. Now, furthermore, that white floor line separating the basement from the main floor is a magic floor. It's totally, totally soundproof. No sound can ever get from your subconscious to you so that you can hear it, as long as everything is kept that way and in fact the basement door is shut. So what goes on in your subconscious never ever bothers you. You could have very, very loud tinnitus in the basement, and as long as the basement door stays shut so that no sound can come upstairs to you at the conscious level, you don't care if it's there or not. So the only way to hear it, open the basement door. So in our first scenario, when your limbic system processed the furtive footfall sound, it immediately did two things. It cranked the volume control, its own internal one, wide open, and it opened your basement door wide open. And the combined effects of this bolted you out of a dead sleep, ready for action. And in our second scenario, when I asked you if your fridge was running, conceptually, you went to the basement door and opened it and basically hollered downstairs, hey, limbic system, is my fridge running? And your limbic system lets the sound come up. And once you are satisfied, yes, everything's fine, fridge is running properly, you shut your basement door. And when you do that, you no longer hear it again. Within a few seconds, you're no longer aware that your fridge is running. So by now, you're probably wondering, what am I talking about this limbic system for and all the rest of it? You thought I was going to talk about tinnitus. Well, what I've done, without explicitly saying so, I've just showed you and taught you how you can gain control over your tinnitus. You see, the secret to gaining control over your tinnitus is to treat your tinnitus sounds exactly the same as you do fridge noise, not the way you treat furtive footfall sounds in the night. You want green flags, you don't want red flags. So you see, to reiterate, whenever you hear a new sound, whether it's a real sound or a phantom sound, doesn't matter. It grabs your attention just for an instant while you are determining, is that a threat or is that something I can safely ignore? But maybe you hear a tinnitus sound. Your limbic system watches how you react to it. If there's no emotional attachment, it's not a threat. Your limbic system flags it with the green flag. And you don't hear it. So if you have tinnitus, essentially the basement door is shut and you don't worry about it. However, if you perceive a sound, and remember, it's your perception of the sound. It has nothing to do with how loud a real sound is. It's how you perceive it. So whether it's true or not, doesn't matter. If you perceive it as being threatening in any way, whether it's going to affect your physical body, your mental health, your spiritual well-being, your financial well-being, whatever, emotional, anything, if you see it as a threat, then your limbic system observes this and flags it with the appropriate flag, depending how much of a threat you perceive it as. So the stronger your emotional reaction, the higher the flag color goes, right up to the triple red, as I call them. Now, there's two different kinds of groups of people with tinnitus. The first group is comprised of about 75% of the people that have tinnitus who are not bothered by their tinnitus. Essentially, they treat their tinnitus as fridge noise. They say it is not a threat, no big deal. It's just a useless background sound that just happens to be there. You don't get bent out of shape. However, the second group, comprised of the 25% that suffer from their tinnitus, treat their tinnitus as a threatening sound. And as a result, their limbic system cranks up the flags and they hear the sound is louder and they suffer as a result. And if you're anxious and high-strung, you cause yourself needless problems with your tinnitus because you're already anxious. And so you notice every little change in your body. And one day, perhaps you notice a new sound. It's a very faint sound. Maybe you only hear it in quiet. However, you get upset and worry about it. And your thoughts go something like this. Remember, this is a new tinnitus sound. What have I done now? How did I damage my ears? Is this going to be permanent damage to my ears? Is there something dreadfully wrong with my brain? And these thoughts, as you can see, are all related to threats to your well-being. Your limbic system notices you're worrying. That's all, of course. It appropriately flags the new tinnitus sound with, say, a yellow flag. And at the same time, turns up its volume a little bit, cracks open the basement door a bit. And the result is your tinnitus is louder. It's more intrusive. And this causes you to worry even more. And your limbic system cooperates, upgrades the flag to orange, turns the volume up more, opens the basement door wider, and now your tinnitus is really bothering you. And now you start to worry, how can I ever live with this racket for the rest of my life? And you just get totally bent out of shape. And in turn, your limbic system cooperates. The limbic system is very cooperative, and it flags it to a red or a double red or triple red flag. And the result is that you are completely consumed with your tinnitus. You can't think of anything else. You have trouble living in society. So you withdraw into your own little world of tinnitus, just filled with tinnitus. And you say to yourself, I can't live like this. I want to die. Now, no matter how much you wish that you could tell your limbic system something, you can't. Your limbic system, in effect, lives in a glass house, bulletproof glass, no doors in it. It's inside. You can't talk to it. It just observes how you respond to all these different things, the sounds that you hear, and flags each one appropriately. And that is why you need to take control of your emotional responses. You need counseling to help you realize that tinnitus is not a threat to your well-being, even though it might seem so at the time. And you need to realize that there is hope for you, that you can take control of any of your emotional responses. And number 4, finally, that you can successfully deal with your tinnitus. You see, you get yourself into this tinnitus mess by worrying about your tinnitus and thereby causing your limbic system to red flag it way up there. I mean, that's bad news. Now, for the good news, your limbic system's database is not written in stone. It's dynamic, to use computer terms. And that's why you can gain control over your tinnitus. You see, just as your limbic system flagged emotionally charged sounds and made them higher and higher and higher, as your limbic system notices you not worrying about something, not having an emotional attachment, it'll start dropping and reducing and reducing and reducing. And so it can get that red flags down to green flags eventually. So in order to bring your tinnitus under control, you need to do the opposite of what you've been doing. Instead of getting bent out of shape because of your tinnitus, you need to learn how to ignore your tinnitus. You need to work at reducing your emotional response to your tinnitus until you have no emotional response to it whatsoever. And now you just treat it like fridge noise. I want to tell you something interesting. If I tell you, ignore your tinnitus, it's easy for me to say that, but is it true? How do you ignore something? You have to bring it into your mind. I told you to bring it to ignore tinnitus. So you bring it into your mind so you know what you're supposed to be ignoring. And you know what you just did? You focused on it instead of ignoring it. The way you ignore something is you focus on something else. And so I tell people, focus on the loves of your life. And when you focus on the loves of your life, by default, you're ignoring your tinnitus. Now, I've traveled all across the US and Canada talking about tinnitus, and I've said to people, did you ever notice that when you're passionately kissing your spouse, you can't hear your tinnitus? You see, your brain only has so much cognitive horsepower, and if you're using it all up and focusing on one thing, there's none left over, so your brain can't even decode your tinnitus and let you hear it. It's just not important, and so the unimportant things get thrown out. Or another way to prove it, you're flying down the freeway and somebody, idiot, comes flying past you and slams on the brakes in front of you. And you've got to tromp on the brakes and just about stand your car on end to avoid an accident. I can guarantee you, you cannot hear your tinnitus at that point, even though it was driving you buggy 10 seconds before. That's the way it is. You've only got that so much cognitive horsepower. So what you want to do is focus on the loves of your life, whatever they are, and ignore your tinnitus. Now, you need to do this. You need to ignore your tinnitus. And you see, only you can do that. Nobody else can do it for you. You have to make up your mind whether you're going to do what is necessary to overcome your tinnitus or let it control you. As Henry Ford once said, whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. Important with tinnitus. Or as someone else said, success comes in cans. Failure comes in can'ts. So if you believe that you can successfully deal with your tinnitus, you can, and vice versa. I have people phone me and I'm talking on the phone and they say, I can't live like this. I can't focus on something else. I can't. And sure enough, they can't. Other people come to me and they say, I can. I say, this is what you need to do. And they say, okay, I'm going to start doing that. And typically they will get back to me in a few weeks, maybe a few months. And they say, my tinnitus is now dropped 50% or 90% or whatever the case may be, because they're getting those cans of success. So I want to gain control over your tinnitus. First, seek out someone who can build hope in you that you can succeed in controlling your tinnitus. The internet tinnitus websites are full of people that say, I can't. You read those, you're going to be a basket case yourself. You need somebody that can build hope in you so that you know you can. And you need hope so that you will start on the road to controlling your tinnitus. You need hope so that you will persevere with your tinnitus treatment. You see, it's not a quick fix. It could take maybe 3 years. You need hope so that you don't quit when the going gets rough, because you're going to have bad days. Know that ahead of time. You're going to also have good days. And as your treatment progresses, you're going to have fewer and fewer bad days and more good days. Second, you want to learn about your tinnitus. That takes away the fear of it. You realize it truly isn't a threat to your well-being. It's just a phantom sound that you can safely ignore. And therefore, you can start to get your tinnitus under control. So what you have to do is you have to learn about your tinnitus. Once you've learned what you need to know, then it's time to forget about it. Because you could keep researching. And all the time that you're researching about your tinnitus, what you're doing is you're focusing on it. You need to focus on it to learn what to do and what treatments to take, and then you need to ignore that. And when your limbic system sees that you no longer go ballistic over your tinnitus, it just cooperates and keeps bringing down those flags. And as you drop, it gets easier and easier to go to the next level. So continue to work on your emotional status towards your tinnitus. And it'll reduce the flag color. But treat each step as success. Getting from a double red to a single red is success. Getting from a single red to an orange is success. You don't have to go from triple red to green. You're going to go through all those steps. Each one of them shows that you are getting your tinnitus under your control. And when you finally reach the green flag stage, you have become habituated to your tinnitus. Now, habituate is just a fancy word that means your tinnitus no longer bothers you. Or at least not very much. I am habituated to my tinnitus. What I do, people phone me up And I might have be, let's say I'm 5 hours into the day, and I'm not even aware I have tinnitus. It's there, but I'm just not aware because I'm focusing on what I'm doing. And somebody phones me up, they want to talk about tinnitus. As soon as they do that, my tinnitus is roaring away, just like it is right now, because I'm talking about tinnitus. I'm hearing it loud. I'm hearing it louder than my own voice right now to me. No big deal, but that's what I hear it. But the good news is, once I hang up from talking to a person, even if I've talked to them for 2 hours, I hang up, and within 5 minutes, I'm no longer aware that I have tinnitus again. That's what habituation does. And so you may go, as you get habituated, for several hours. Some people go for several days or weeks without hearing their tinnitus. But anytime you want to hear it, you can listen for it, and it's right there. So the question you all want to know, does this really work? And my answer is, you bet it does. Over the years, I've helped hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people successfully deal with their tinnitus. I've had people that phone me up, first words out of their mouth, I want to commit suicide. I can't stand my tinnitus. And supposedly you're supposed to go to send them to the suicide line. I don't do that. Guess what I do? I build hope in them that you can successfully deal with your tinnitus. I talk to them and I teach them about their tinnitus. I take away their fear of it. I show how they can do it. And I teach them how to ignore their tinnitus by focusing on the loves of their life. And that same person that wanted to commit suicide at the beginning of the phone call, by the end of the phone call, they're laughing and joking with me. That is what hope can do. You see, they have learned, well, put it this way, the hard part is still ahead of them. Actually putting into practice what they've learned, but they've learned what they need to do, and they are on their way. You see, they are bringing their tinnitus under control, and you can do the same. So what I've shared with you today is just dealing with the psychic component of tinnitus. I've taken it from the 16th chapter of this book. And the rest of this book is filled with many different solutions for the somatic component of tinnitus, the sound therapy. There's things like tinnitus retraining therapy. There's neuromonics. Both of these have both the psychic and the somatic component. Unfortunately, too often what happens is that the practitioner focuses more on the somatic part. In other words, let's get a hearing aid with a noisemaker in it. Let's get that set up right. But they don't give you enough training on how to do it and all what I've been teaching you about how your emotions are the more important part of it. We don't have time to look at these today, but it's all in the book. So it's been great sharing with you today about tinnitus. And I trust I've built hope in those of you that maybe have tinnitus and want to get it more under control. If you haven't already habituated to it, like I have done mine, so that you can lead a happy and productive life in spite of having tinnitus. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Neil. That was awesome. I wanted to share a story that I heard in my clinic just the other day, an example of what you're talking about. And the person was talking about when she was driving over Stevens Pass and there's a lot of snow, and she was gripping the wheel concentrating really hard. Her anxiety was really high, and her tinnitus just started blaring at her. And she said to me, she realized that relaxation is really important to help her tinnitus. So that was a really blatant example for her to experience. And so it was just kind of taking note of what's happening when the tinnitus is occurring, and the level of sound and what's happening to you, is sort of becoming more aware of that is helpful. Yeah. Are there any questions?
I have a comment. Neil, I think that the timing of your lecture today couldn't have been better. I'll bet you there isn't one person in this group listening that isn't under some kind of stress, small or maybe very large, with what we are going through in our culture and in the world today. Virus, and then the weather problems, all of these. And you mentioned, it was mentioned about driving and in the snow. I went through that myself, but everything that you have said fits a pattern that I wasn't really aware of. I was getting there, but it just nailed it in. I think I have said before that I have tinnitus. I suffer from it a great deal. That's what brought me to this group, and the information I got, everything helped me understand it better. But this nails it on the head, and especially this time of our lives. For example, the other night I was sleeping, and all of a sudden I was awakened by all this wind and terrible storm sounds. I began to worry about my windows breaking or what's going on. I got up and looked out there. There was all the snow flurrying around, like your friend in the car. I was getting anxious. And that was exactly as I got back into bed, I thought, oh my God, it's my tinnitus is back again. But I had already made the connection myself, because after I joined this group and I learned about tinnitus and I got hearing aids, one day I woke up and I thought, I don't have tinnitus. It's gone. I'm cured. I'm cured. Well, that was getting a little bit too ambitious because I wasn't cured, but I don't suffer from it constantly. Like right now, there is no tinnitus, but that changes again. Neil explained by levels of emotional involvement and stress. So it is a warning sign. And like he said, after that storm thing, I thought, okay, get back in bed. Now it's not breaking your windows. You're not in any risk, Beverly. Just relax and concentrate on breathing first. Just breathe. Be in the now. The second step. Now, count all your blessings. Remember the song, when I'm weary and I can't sleep, I count my blessings and then I go to sleep. Something like that was an old song. But that works. I started, okay, let's think of all the things I'm really grateful and the people in my life I'm grateful for. And that calmed me down and I went back to sleep. And when I woke up in the morning, didn't really think about the tinnitus. If it was there, it wasn't enough to bother me. So there's a case in point. And I'm saying back to everybody, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, especially if you suffer from tinnitus and the stress that we are under every day because of what's happening around us. Thank you for your time. Feel very strongly about it though.
Well, it's very important to know that, just how strong our emotions affect people. And I have given this presentation, well, all across the country, and I actually speak at a number of HLA chapters on this subject. This will be the third time just recently that I've given this one, and I will be giving it to an American Tinnitus Association chapter in 2 weeks' time, 2 weeks Monday, I think. Any other questions?
Ted has his hand up. Ted, do you have a question?
Sort of. I have been almost killed 5 times in various actions, and I suffered from PTSD. It would wake me up. I would grab my gun. I would search the house for whatever it was that really bothered me. And my PTSD therapist got me realizing if I picture some of the real pleasant, happy things that I've done in my life, get my mind off of it, I'll sit down and read for 4 or 5 hours during the middle of the night. As the sun comes up, I'll slip back to bed and may get a couple of hours of sleep. But it's very, very similar to what you described for PTSD. So I use experiences from wonderful things that I've seen and done and just forget about the scary stuff. But first I grab my gun and I search the house, make sure it's safe, then relax.
Yeah, relaxing really makes a difference. And I
All-
mean,
All the difference in the world.
and people don't do that. They get all uptight and, you know, and their tinnitus just gets worse. Now, I've had tinnitus that I can remember for over 70 years now.
Wow.
And I just don't let it bother me. You know, it tries to sometimes, and I would, you know, if I had my choice, well, yeah, no, I don't want tinnitus, but it's certainly not the worst thing that could happen to me in my life. And so it's just there. But one thing I never mentioned is that when you have tinnitus yourself and you are dealing with people with tinnitus, you are focusing on tinnitus all the time. I mean, I'm writing books on tinnitus, I write articles on tinnitus. I answer numerous emails on tinnitus. I field numerous phone calls on tinnitus. So a lot of times I'm thinking tinnitus hour after hour. And that's exactly what I told you not to do. You don't focus on it, but just an occupational hazard. But because I know that I can habituate so fast, I put up with it when like right now. Who cares? So I'm hearing it. No big deal. Any other questions?
Well, thank you so much, Neil. That was just very enlightening and encouraging. I've been down that road, and I just, as a comment from me, what convinced me that it was not my ears that were causing my tinnitus was the fact that I didn't hear out of my left ear for many, many years, but I still had tinnitus. And even after I got the cochlear implant, which of course, when I got it, destroyed any residual hearing that might be there. So I know that there's no hearing in my left ear. I still have tinnitus on my left ear. So it's not my hearing, it's something else, which is how, as you talked about, how I think about it. And so, like you, I try just not to think about it, and it's amazing how it goes away.
Yeah, one thing I should mention about that is you say you got it in your left ear. Tinnitus can be in one ear, or it can be in both ears. Mine, sometimes I'm hearing it in my left ear, sometimes in my right ear, sometimes in both ears, and sometimes you only hear it just in your head without reference to either ear. And it can just change from one to the other. So you could have tinnitus in your left ear, even though it was really caused by, let's just pretend it was caused by your right ear, damage in your right ear, assuming that's what it was. So it can jump around, and it can change volume. It can change sounds. Some people tell me, well, I hear this low rumbling sound, but that's not tinnitus, because they think of tinnitus as a ringing sound or buzzing sound or something. And I have to assure them that, yes, that is tinnitus too.
Right. Well, thank you very much. That was very, very informative and hopeful, I guess is one of the things that I would say.
Build hope.
The people that have tinnitus, it's a very hopeful message. So, and we're so happy to have you, Neil, as a resource. If people are struggling with their tinnitus, I'm sure that you can go to the Center for Hearing Loss Help and contact Neil, and he's there as a resource. So thank you, Neil.
My pleasure.
I'd like to, yes, let's do the applause for Neil. I'd like to just bring you up to date on a couple of very important items for the chapter. First off, we have finalized the Founders Fund. So those of you that have heard in the past, this will be a little repetitious, but we're working with the Whatcom Community Foundation to let local high school students that may have hearing loss know that there's now a scholarship, 2 scholarships actually available for them for their post-secondary education. We have announced the first availability of the scholarships, and I will send out a link to the Whatcom Community Foundation's, it's called Dollars for Scholars program. And you will see the description in that. The first awards will be made to graduates this spring. So we're really excited about that. We want to thank specifically Pam and Spencer Audiology for their most generous donation. If they don't mind, if I say Jerry and Joanna Olmsted also made a contribution to that fund, and we're getting other contributions. And the reason I bring this up is that, Clay Dean and family have suggested that they really don't need any more flowers relative to Bert's passing. But if people would like to make a donation to the Founders Fund, Bert was very, as he put it, honored and humbled by the establishment of the Founders Fund. I will tell you, I think we all feel some comfort in the fact that Bert was aware of this fund being established before he passed, and we're really thankful for that. So Clay Dean has asked us to encourage anyone who wants to make some kind of donation in honor of Bert, that doing so to the Founders Fund would be very much in keeping with what he would want. So that's that. And speaking of Bert, as a reminder for those that might have joined a little late, we are going to have a special meeting on March 6th, again at 10 o'clock in the morning, where we will be able to share our stories about Bert and just kind of have this this time for ourselves where we can express our appreciation for all that Bert did for us. And then finally, the program scheduled for March 20th is Dr. Sladen from Western Washington talking about adult oral rehab in the time of COVID, and what they can do with respect to continuing the oral rehabilitation program at Western, which for those of you who have not participated in it, if you think it would be helpful, I can promise you from my personal experience that it will be helpful. So be sure to avail yourself of the March 20th meeting and then get in touch with Dr. Sladen and try to get into that program if you can. That's all I have, and we've still got a few minutes if people would like to share anything or have any questions. Either raise your hand under the reactions tube, or like Erlene, just raise your hand.
There. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, so what is the address of where we make a donation to the Founders Fund? I want to
You
make a
send it-
donation. Where
you
do I
would-
send it?
You would send it to our PO box, which is PO Box 252. And help me here, somebody. I think it's 98227. Is that right, Joyce? Never mind. I got it someplace. I just wrote it.
That's right, Larry.
What? I can't hear.
I think that
Joyce is checking. Joyce is checking.
Yeah. It's 98227.
Yes, 98227.
Okay,
okay. Thank you. Does that answer your question, Erlene?
yes, it does. And also, second question, don't we have a roster of all the members? You know, a roster from, all our names and,
Yes, yes. We do have a roster.
okay, so how do I get one?
Oh, you asked me, and I can probably get you one.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you.
What-
Okay.
Let me just explain why you don't have one already, okay? We stopped sharing the rosters because we have some members who are concerned about their personal contact information being distributed too widely. And so we try to be very sensitive to that. In the past, when we've had membership drives, we've asked people to identify if they do not want their personal information shared. So we have created a roster which excludes those people who have indicated they don't want it shared. I suspect there are some others, so I will be happy to share it with you. I would just ask you to only use it for hearing loss and, contacting your friends in the hearing loss group and try to protect that information like it was your own. So, but I'll be happy to send you one, Erlene, because I know you understand. But that explains anybody else who wants one, just let me know and I will get you a roster. I think it's in these times, it would be easier to stay in touch with people if you had their contact information, which in fact, I can get you. So there you go. I will get you one, Erlene. Ted?
I went through a period, I spent 4 months in a hospital and they fed me autotoxic drugs that just about destroyed my hearing. And because of HLAA, I met Dr. Slater, went to the university, and they've made all the difference in the world in my hearing. And I can't recommend them highly enough.
Well, thank you for that, Ted. And I certainly second that. They're a tremendous resource. And don't be hesitant to reach out, even though COVID has made it difficult to go to them. They've developed some really unique remote tools that they can use. And so you can still get some assistance from them remotely. So if you've got questions, if you've got things that you think they could help with, don't hesitate to reach out. they might surprise you and be able to fix your problem even though you can't go visit them. Joyce?
Hi. I wanted to say thank you to Dr. Neal. That was so informative. And yes, while you were talking about tinnitus, I could hear my tinnitus. So I really identify with that. But I wanted to share that when I go to the dentist, I really get tinnitus so bad. And sometimes I have to, I used to ask for earphones or to play music, which helped. And I wondered, Dr. Neal, if you have ever talked to dentists, in some of their conventions or whatever about that. Because when I go to the dentist, I hear that drill in my head, even though it might not be drilling. So, Dr. Neal, have you ever considered talking to dentists about people suffering from tinnitus when they're there and maybe playing music for people?
I've never thought of it, but nobody's ever approached me. I certainly make sure that my dentists are aware of it. One of the things that dentists don't know, and dental hygienists, is that when they use the ultrasonic scalers and so on, I hear from so many people that it's wrecked them, their ears. And so it's important that they know. And I have right on my dental chart, no electronic scalers ever, nothing ultrasonic. And
what is that? What are you talking about? What is that stuff? What is it?
For getting all the plaque off your teeth and so on, the dental hygienist, instead of using their tools and scraping it off, they use ultrasonic to break it off. And if you get it, if it gets your ears, it seems to be almost permanent. And so you can read about it on one of the 1,000 some odd articles I've written, and all the people below it that chime in and say, this is what happened to me. That's how I learn so much, is people tell me their experiences, and I put it together and write an article about it. And sometimes I only have 1 or 2 people that I even know that it exists. And then I put it up, and then people just keep adding and adding and adding to it. Like one of my interesting articles was on moving tongue tinnitus. When you move your tongue, you stick it out, or you push it up, or you go sideways. That causes tinnitus for some people. And so I've got an article about that. And I started out with only 1 or 2 people that ever said it. And now there's a whole pile of comments underneath it. And the same for all different kinds. So I hear the kinds that it seems nobody else hears from.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions or comments? Jerry and Joanna, it looks like it's nice out in Anacortes. You've got sun coming in. Where did they go? There they are. Okay. And Andy, I see you, but I don't see Bill. Is that not a good sign? You're muted, Andy. There you go.
That is not a good sign. Bill's been experiencing a lot of pain. And so he's going to have to relax in a chair and take the pain off his back.
Well, tell him we're sorry. We missed him. We're thinking about him, and we hope he feels better.
Well, he's been diagnosed with multiple myeloma. And so this has been a very difficult few months for him.
I'm sure for you.
Well,
you have our thoughts.
I'm not experiencing the pain. He is.
Yes.
He's a good patient, though.
Oh, good. Good. Charlene.
I want to say how happy I am to see Joan Boschman and Irv, because they have arranged it so that they're with us in view again.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. And stay safe, stay healthy. Hope everybody gets their shots, and we can get together sometime sooner rather than later. We're all becoming good at Zoom, but boy, I sure would like to see everybody. It's hard to hug on Zoom, you know? So we look forward to seeing everyone on March 6th for the ceremony with Bert, and then on March 20th for Dr. Sladen. So in the meantime, take care, reach out whenever you have questions, and take care of yourself. I'm going to end the meeting. Bye.